Welcome everyone to our fourth and final panel of our Spring Career Accelerator. Today's topic is robotics, and I'm Elisa, co-founder of RePicture. With me here today is Joanne, a RePicture peer mentor from 2023, who will moderate our discussion. You'll get to meet her here very shortly. On our agenda today, I'll first provide a brief intro to RePicture, and then turn it over to Joanne to introduce herself and our panelists and lead our Q&A. As a reminder for our students, there will be an opportunity for you to ask your questions in the last 15 or 20 minutes of the session, so be prepared for that. And finally, at 5 o'clock, we'll say goodbye to our panelists and move into our co-working session. So a quick overview of RePicture. I always like to start with our why, and what drives us and why we started RePicture is that currently only a tiny slice of humanity is building our future. STEM fields are this huge force shaping the world all around us, and yet these fields are still mostly homogeneous. Additionally, there's projected to be an 85 million person shortage in STEM by 2030. And everyone at all ages and career stages need ways to more meaningfully explore careers, guidance with developing professional skills and with networking, and an online presence that can help them connect with the right opportunities for them. So RePicture is building a better STEM resume where you can explore, learn, grow, and connect with the world of STEM, all while building a holistic resume that says a lot more about you than a bulleted list ever could. We do this through our platform and our flagship award-winning Career Accelerator. In the program, we guide you with networking, building critical professional skills, and with career and self-discovery, and all while helping you build a really awesome resume and portfolio of work. What this looks like is students learn about careers by researching and publishing articles about real-world STEM projects, which showcases their skills and interests and talents. And for students, it's a way to stand out. For companies, it's a way to connect with motivated students that are genuinely interested in the work that you do. And our students are helping to build this new way to explore careers through projects in the world all around you. They're helping to show how STEM helps people in society. RePicture is a mission-driven public benefit organization, and our vision is a world where everyone can thrive in STEM. So that's RePicture. And last, before I turn it over, I want to highlight for everyone here and those watching later, you can find all of our past panels on our YouTube channel on a wide variety of topics. So panels like today continue to be a resource for students everywhere, even after today. And so with that, a great big welcome to all of our panelists and to our moderator for today, Joanne. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Joanne to introduce herself and our panelists and moderate our discussion today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joanne. I'm currently a second-year stats major at UC Davis, and I was also a peer mentor from RePicture's 2023 Summer STEM Career Accelerator. And with that, I would like to introduce our panelists for today. So our first guest panelist today will be Deniz Dogruer. Deniz is the co-founder and COO of Squishy Robotics, a startup that created a device that's able to detect hazards and provide on-the-ground data for first responders. This lightweight, squishy robot is capable of dropping distances up to 1,000 feet, enabling it to access hard-to-reach places before humans enter the scene. In 2020, Deniz was selected to attend and represent her company at Silicon Valley Bank Trek, a prestigious entrepreneurial event. Her company is also the recipient of highly competitive investment and professional development opportunity from the Berkeley SkyDeck Accelerator Program. Deniz is also passionate about education. She worked at the Silicon Valley Academy for 5 years, where she taught middle school math and science. Deniz received her PhD in engineering education from UC Berkeley and her MS and BS in mechanical engineering from the University of Nevada, Reno. Our next guest panelist today will be Stephen McKinley. Stephen is the co-founder and VP of operations at Ambi Robotics, a company dedicated to AI-powered solutions for optimizing warehouse operations. The robots can sort unique packages due to their efficient machine learning capabilities and provide detailed analytics to improve overall performance. As a postdoc researcher, Stephen developed BLUE, standing for Berkeley Robot for Learning in Unstructured Environments. These robot arms were built with the age of AI in mind, to accelerate machine learning and robotics research. The project became Berkeley Open Arms, design, outreach, and manufacturing organization. And Stephen briefly worked as a lead mechanical engineer for energy storage manufacturer before returning to UC Berkeley to complete his PhD in mechanical engineering. He also holds an MS in mechanical engineering from UC Berkeley and a BS in mechanical engineering from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Our third guest panelist today will be Jennifer Bolokis. Jennifer is an associate mechanical engineer at TerraBase Energy, the first automated and digital field factor for solar-powered plant construction. Their solutions overcome solar energy's major barrier, lack of resources, and will contribute to a rapid growth of solar. Through modeling and detailed mapping capabilities, TerraBase cuts costs and development times. Previously, Jennifer worked as a production assistant for DMG Mori Manufacturing USA, a technology company operating in the automotive, aerospace, and medical industries. While studying at UC Davis, Jennifer worked on a NASA project where she researched tools needed for a robotic arm that would make repairs on the International Space Station. For a separate research project, she investigated the effect of biological materials with gradient porosity on prosthetic implants. And Jennifer received her bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from UC Davis. Finally, our last guest panelist today will be Swapnil Das. Swapnil is a robotics software developer at Jacobi Robotics, where he develops software to control robot arm movement. Jacobi Robotics' mission is to accelerate robot automation through the use of AI, talented software developers, and safety-driven engineering. While studying at Carnegie Mellon University, Swapnil conducted research on path planning for self-driving vehicles, developing an audio sensing suite to identify sounds like sirens and horns. Using machine learning, he worked on a system capable of recognizing emergency vehicles and flashing lights. Swapnil has also worked as a freelancer for the Game Creation Society, working as a designer, writer, musician, and programmer for 4 video games. Swapnil received his Master of Engineering from the electrical and Computer Engineering from Carnegie Mellon University, and a Bachelor of Engineering in Electrical and Computer Sciences from UC Berkeley. And I'd like to thank all of our panelists for joining our meeting today. So we'll start our panel discussion with a quick icebreaker, which is, what was the first dream career you remember having, and how old were you, and why was that your dream career? And so any of the panelists can start.
I'll give it a stab. Sure, why not? I think for me, I actually got into robotics pretty early when I was young, though not for like any deep understanding of the field. I think those who have an interest in robotics may be familiar with the Lego Mindstorms sets. Those are a very common way I've seen in a lot of high schools to co-curricularly teach robotics to students, and I got access to that at a young age. And I think that really set me on the path of, whoa, robots are cool. I'd like to check them out. No deeper thought than that. They were just very exciting and fascinating to me. So a while to me that I ended up in this field from that impulse, really.
I can jump in. A little slightly different response for me. My first dream career was I wanted to be a marine biologist, only so that I can be one of the trainers at SeaWorld that gets to swim with the dolphins and the killer whales. I don't know where that initially came from, but my room was filled with posters of dolphins and killer whales. But yeah, so marine biologist.
I don't think I've ever had a dream career. I remember being fascinated with making things and sharing those things with other people and entering into the vulnerable space that you get to have when you are showing something brand new to others. And that's really what I wanted to do with my whole life and find a way to channel that.
So for me personally, I've wanted to be an engineer my whole life. I remember being in 5th grade and going to a Society of Women Engineers event. And they told me, if you like math and you like science, then you'd be a good engineer. And I said, well, sign me up. And haven't looked back since. So yeah, pretty much living my dream career, I guess.
And then building off of that question, can you tell us the story of how you got to where you are today? Starting back as early childhood, can you highlight some of the key steps and turning points that led you to where you are today? And we can start with Jen, since she was the last one who went for the last question.
Yeah. So I think I just talked about, fifth grade, being excited about it. When I was in eighth grade, I participated in a VEX robotics competition. It was the first time it ever came to my school. So I was part of the inaugural team. And so being able to build with little like VEX robotics kits at a young age really inspired me to continue in the engineering pathway that has led me to where I am today, being involved in robotics.
I grew up near a dump, and in the dump there were all sorts of broken things that in a special section that you could kind of take away if you wanted to, if you really wanted to. And my parents were really patient with my brothers and I, and let us like collect all sorts of old bicycles and computers and stuff like that and drag them back to our basement. We amassed a huge pile of stuff in there that we'd be working on and trying to fix and resurrect. And eventually that became too much. So they strongly suggested that we try to organize it into some sort of lab. That's the idea that they pitched to us as like middle schoolers. And so that process of organizing that space and my trash pile into something that could be usable for a group of us was really instrumental in really setting my mind into this idea of developing things collaboratively and working as a team with others and trying to like come together and build a space that could really be something where we create special things.
I think thinking back, initially ideas of what I wanted to do or become were just associated with what was around me, who I saw around me doing what different jobs. It's kind of limited by, they're a function of your experiences, of the role models that you have in your life. So while I was fascinated by dolphins and killer whales and I wanted to train them and swim with them, realized really quickly that I really didn't like biology. It seemed very much memorization based, but really enjoyed math and science. Same time, my dad, professor of engineering. And so very much in our household, education was very important. Decided to major in engineering because I liked math and science. And it took me a while to figure out why I chose engineering and why I didn't choose to just major in math or science, but why that became engineering. And through some reflection, I found out that engineering has a very special people-centric component to it. You're using math and science to identify problems and develop solutions for people. And I think that was the component that drew me to it. I don't think I ever wanted to be a quote unquote typical engineer. I think people have different responses in what is a typical engineer anyways. I was interested in education, wanted to become a professor. Through different experiences afforded to me, undergraduate, graduate life, ended up as an entrepreneur, and then found this whole different niche of engineering and human-centered design. And it's just become a passion. So that's just, your journey has a way of leading you different places. And it's kind of really interesting to see where you end up.
So for me, I mentioned how I got into robotics, at least the vague notion of it, pretty early on in my life. And then I think in like 8th or 9th grade, they introduced us to programming languages like QBasic. And I was like, oh, I can play music on this. I think that's what tipped me off to the fact that like coding and programming was another way to express my creativity, another platform for me to do something clever, something interesting. Just it's like writing, but in a different medium. And so I grew really attached to that ideal, that promise. And so when I went into like engineering, to me, that was always the draw for me, that this is a platform where, ideas that I have can be translated into something that will have meaningful, tangible impact in the real world. And I can share that with other people. So for me, I would say those formative experiences of interacting with code, interacting with physical robots were what really set me down this like domino chain of events that has essentially led me here, I would say.
Thank you all for sharing your stories. So can you tell us a little bit about what you do now and how your work helps people? And what does your day-to-day life look like? And what do you enjoy the most about what you do now? And so let's start with Deniz for this question.
Yeah, I would say that I think during my traditional engineering education, so we'll say undergraduate and master's degree, which at this point was a couple years ago. I don't want to date myself too much. I think engineering back then was still very much, building stuff. But here's the list of requirements that we gave you, not necessarily finding the list of requirements or not necessarily identifying the problem. And so the pre-design or the human component of what I think engineering has wasn't part of my formal education. And I think that's why I was initially probably interested in more engineering education and becoming a professor, because I wanted that human component. And I think back then I was thinking a traditional engineer was a 9-to-5 job, really not really interacting with a lot of people. But I think a lot of people here will probably say that's the furthest from the truth. Engineering definitely is very people-centric. You're working very closely with people, with end users, identifying what their needs are. And I think in my job, I'm very lucky that we're working on novel solutions, and the whole company takes a very dedicated approach, a human-centered approach to not necessarily just designing a product, but designing a product for people. And so the people, the end user, the problem, how it needs to fit into their existing workflow becomes the driver of your design decisions, not necessarily how cool the technology is or how different it is. And so I think I get to work very closely with people in my job. And just by the nature of the people that we work with, within public safety, they're often risking their lives to save others. And so being able to work with them and say, hey, how can we keep you safer? How can we make sure that you are making decisions, life and death decisions, with with the most valuable, with the most information that you can possibly have to make those safe decisions? So yeah, I guess definitely working very closely with people, because at the end of the day, they're the driver force in your design decisions.
And then, you can go next, Swapna.
No, I was just, I really resonated with that sentiment you shared, Deniz, about like working like with people in mind. Just to, go back to the question, you talked about like what it is that we're trying to do. And a lot of what we're trying to do is make a strong robotics platform which can power a lot of different applications. And, also have those applications work in a real setting. And so when you talk about people, I agree so much, because a lot of what we want to do as well is make sure that everyone has a chance to work with robotics as a field, and that it's as accessible and easy to work with as possible, and that it can empower as many things as possible. So, I mean, the day-to-day of my life is sort of spent in the development of this platform, as well as working with physical robots for many different applications for different end users. And it's always a question of understanding what their needs are, what they're trying to solve, and how we can come up with something intelligent that does everything they need. Because there's a lot of places where I see that, robotics can do a lot of good and can save a lot of effort for people. And, wherever we can contribute and like make a dent in that, I'm happy to call that like a part of the contribution we make.
So we've been building these sorting systems using robotics for about 6 years now, and we've spread them all across the country. And each of these things are about the size of a truck, like a semi-tractor truck, and contains a robot arm about the size of a human being in there that's sorting out parcels. And these are used by people who have never come in contact with robotics or AI before. And it's been really fascinating to watch how these systems have been put into place into these warehouses and used by these people. And over time, the jobs around them have changed. And that's been fascinating to watch. And something that I've seen is that folks are now staying around much longer in these jobs. They're taking more pride in these jobs, because now they get to work with technology instead of working only with their bodies and their hands and their eyes. And we're seeing folks bringing their kids into work and showing them where they work in a place where before there was a tremendous amount of turnover in these roles. So it's really exciting to see the jobs fundamentally change when we are bringing in technology and robotics.
Yeah, I think I have a similar sentiment than what's being said, because I work in an industry that is trying to improve the work conditions for these solar fields. You're installing these 100-pound modules over your head in the middle of the desert, and it's just not great working conditions. And furthermore, with the huge shift towards solar and the push for solar in general, we need to be, working faster. And yet our overall like the workforce is shrinking. And so I think just being able to bring automation and bring improved ways to do things to people will help not only the people actually having to do the jobs, but the people who get benefit by having access to cheaper solar to help our environment and all. So yes.
All right, and then building off of that question, our next question is, of all the projects that you've worked on, what has been your favorite and why? And for this question, we'll have like the first two volunteers who decide to answer this question.
I can go. I think my favorite project has been this one, the company. I mentioned it's 6 years old now, and I think around year 3, I realized that what we were building was the organism that builds the robots and not the robots itself. And that realization really tapped into that childhood experience that I was sharing earlier, where I got to create something that enabled us to create more. And I think building the culture here has been my most intense experience, and being a part of that has been really truly humbling. So the aspect of building the company has been the most important project of my life.
And then would anyone else like to volunteer?
I would say that as an engineer working at a startup, the best, like the most fun you have on a project is being able to see it in person, and when you're handing it off to the end user to actually begin using it, and then you can identify what's working, what doesn't work with your product, and make changes based off of that for further improvement. Because at the end of the day, it's how the user interprets you. You may have a great design as an engineer, or so you think, but then you hand it to an end user, and how they interpret it and decide to use it might be completely different than what you imagined. And so taking that feedback in and just making it better so that it's continuing to help the person it's intended for. I think just being able to be on site for projects is probably my favorite part.
If I can just add to what's been said, I think one of the greatest things about working with a startup is it's usually all hands on deck. Everybody does a little bit of everything. You're usually in firefighting mode, trying to put out the fires or make ends meet, and that affords you a lot of opportunities that sometimes you might not be able to get in larger companies, where you're only seeing a very small portion or working on a very, very small portion of the overall project. You may not have a lot of awareness of the whole process. You're just given, here, this is your project, this is your part, these are your deadlines, these are your constraints, now go. But being part of a startup, you often get to see more of that design process, going from initial problem identification all the way to end user handoff, right? You probably have a little bit more leeway and autonomy and say of what to do and how to do it, and that engagement with the end users. And I can say that process has been very humbling. Yeah, what I like to tell our team and our engineers is, you may be the expert in the technology and the solution we're developing, but the end users are the experts in what they need the technology to do for them. So go learn from them, ask them questions, tell them what they love, ask them what they love about what you're doing, but more importantly, ask them what they hate about it, why it's not working, and then work towards that. So I think one of the benefits of working at a small startup is you get to see so much more of that process, of that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And being in a startup myself as well, I can definitely attest to this. there is a lot more involvement and activity involved with like understanding the vision of what you're trying to accomplish and actually being able to contribute to that in a tangible way. And to turn back to the question that you brought up earlier, the most recent deployment I worked on, we were working for palletizing for a large warehouse, and in there we had to contend with a lot of the very practical day-to-day difficulties that come up with palletizing and placing boxes on a pallet that otherwise just don't come to one's head immediately. And that's the stuff you only figure out from actually being there, talking with the people there, working there, and seeing, okay, these are the problems they're facing. Oh, the boxes that they end up producing are like super swollen and strange because of like a certain defect here and there. How do we account for that to make their life easier? And I think just the all hands on deck that has been echoed before, and being able to see a problem, say, I know what to do something, immediately see the results, and then get that gratification of, yes, I was able to make a quick difference here. And again and again and again, putting out every fire, exactly. I think that's been the most validating part of like the work here for me so far.
Then our next question is, how did you learn about and land your current job, and what would make an applicant stand out in the field of robotics? And then I guess we can go with Swapnil first.
Sure. In terms of how I found this job, it was mostly me just sort of looking around and searching for jobs in the robotics space. And this was a job that was based from my alma mater, Berkeley. It was so close. So it was just sort of a union of fortunate events coming together that I was able to work with Jacoby as I am right now. And in terms of what I think would make an applicant stand out, other than the general things that one would expect from engineering, as like comfort with math and like the robotics itself, I think the one thing that comes up, even for like someone like me who is in title a robotic software developer, is being willing to physically engage with the reality that there is a large metal weight of a robot arm working in front of you that is a very strong and powerful machine and needs to be handled and worked with very safely so that no one gets injured working with it, and so that it works as efficiently as possible. And showing that you have the capacity or willingness to grasp with robots as a physical object rather than as an abstraction, like, oh, I'm just going to code some stuff, it's going to do it. The moment you recognize it and respect it as a real thing, a lot of questions that you might immediately brush off, like, oh, at what point should it be that the robot should trigger like a safety alert for the user? These questions become real the moment you acknowledge that the robot is real. So I think experiences that show that you have that capacity are definitely very valuable.
All right, and then we can jump to Stephen.
I would say demonstrating a bias for action and dependability and ability to lead team is really valuable in this space. Because of what Swapnil said, you have to work with physical things and you have to work with each other and be able to convince each other that a direction is the right direction to take.
All right, and then we can jump to Jen.
So I got my current job because of connections and people I knew. As listed or as stated during my bio, I was working at DMG Mori beforehand. I wasn't doing anything engineering specific. I was they're a factory that just produces CNC machines. So I was maintaining the production schedule for that. And one of the managers of that company went to Terabase Energy and then said, hey, like, I know that you haven't done any engineering work, but you were very efficient in your job. So why don't you come over here and like, we'll give you an opportunity. So I think that for you students who are starting out, I think having connections is the most important thing you can bring. As someone who did the whole thing where you're applying to endless jobs, you know, on Indeed and whatever, where you're not having that face-to-face connection, I think being able to know someone in the field. And if you don't know someone in the field, at the very least, try to make a connection in the interview, that it's not just that you have a list of great great resume, but also like something kind of personal clicks with the interviewer so that they remember you in a kind of, I wouldn't say like emotional way, but in a way that they kind of positively remember you to go back to you.
Yeah, and then Deniz, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think just kind of echoing, I think what others have said. I think how I ended up, co-founding Squishy Robotics was, if you would have asked me 10 years ago, starting a company or the business development side of things wouldn't have even been on my radar of things that I would be interested in, because I didn't have any of those experiences. I hadn't done anything in that field. So, I think connections are very important, as stated, but it's also, not everybody also can have those connections. So exposure, try to experience a lot of different things, try new things. My mom always says, you don't know what you don't know, right? So go explore, go learn, find out what you like, find out what you don't like. That's just as important. Through that process, I think you start making those connections, and I think you truly identify what is your passion, what is your motivation. And then I think once you find that shows through. I mean, the interest in the math and the science and the technical knowledge, that, most people can attain that, hopefully, and you're going through that. But I think what sets somebody out apart from all of that is true passion and interest in what they're doing. So, and I think that just comes with exploring and finding what's inside of you that really motivates you to keep pushing through.
All right, and then this will be our last question before we open up the floor to student questions. Has anything surprised you about your career, and is it different from what you imagined what you would be doing when you were in school? And so let's start with Deniz.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of alluded to this a little bit before. I think especially during my undergrad and during my master's degree, engineering to me was very much it wasn't a very people person job. It wasn't like a collaborative thing. I think that's changed over the years. But it was more of you're given constraints and given what you need to work towards, and you design a solution. And people generally weren't part of that process. So I think what surprised me as I've worked through my career and working on the problem sets, the complex problems that we're working on now, it's that the people are the most important part of it, right? So identifying what their needs are, what their pain points are. You might immediately, as an engineer, think the solution, but at the end of the day, if it's not going to work with their workflows, if you don't understand how it fits within the whole system, the ecosystem, it doesn't matter. And so I think what surprised me is how much the end user, the entire ecosystem, how much of a systems problem it is. Often the developing of the widget can be very, very siloed, but it needs to fit into the bigger picture. What are the constraints? Are there any regulatory issues? With a lot of the stuff that's developing in technology, really kind of identifying, well, what are potential issues that might arise from this, having more of an empathetic view on things, or what are potential, pitfalls to, designing a certain way, being very open-minded. And I think all of that comes from a more systems approach that I think engineering and the teaching of engineering has adopted over the years, which is great to see. But, just keeping all of that in mind. So yeah, I think that's the thing that surprised me the most is how people-centric it was. Because that initially wasn't my view of engineering, way back when I was an undergrad.
And then I guess we can go to Swap now.
I have a maybe slightly silly one for this. I didn't realize that there'd be so much travel in a robotics job. Turns out when you're working with many, like different users who are working in different places with different robots, you have to go back and forth and travel a lot. And if you're a fan of travel, I would highly recommend it. You get to try out and experience a lot of different places and work with a lot of different robots that way. But definitely it was not what I had in mind as like, oh, this is a very normal and expected part of robotics development. It's not something that immediately struck me. So I would say that is what it was like, oh, this is new to me when it came to robotics.
And then we'll go to Stephen.
I've been surprised by how much of my career has been dominated by storytelling. I think that products are stories, and convincing others to join your story is what creates new things together. And we have to do things together to create big things that impact people. Even little features on an existing product are stories that are being told to satisfy the needs of somebody out there in the field that's using the robots. And investors and customers are joining our story. They're trying to see us as an entity and want to come along for the adventure. And most importantly, everybody who joins Ambi as an employee gets to tell a part of the story and write a part of the story along with us. And I did not expect that when I started.
I'd say for me, I think what surprised me the most is just, I guess where I am. When I was, coming to my end in school and having to start apply to jobs, I had no idea where I wanted to work, what I wanted to do. And so I took a job, like I said, at DMG Mori, and it just so happened I met someone there that brought me here, and now I love my job. So I think like just not having too much of a plan of where you think life is going, just kind of take the opportunities as they come. I think that's very surprising. It surprised me that I was able to come here based off of that, because usually I'm a very like planned person where I think I have a path going. So I'm in a completely different spot than that I thought I was going to be. I didn't think I was a startup person, but here I am loving it. So I think just, going with the flow and going along with the new surprises you see along the way.
All right, so now we'll be opening up the floor for student questions, and we invite students who have questions to turn on their camera and ask their questions verbally. Or you can enter it in the chat. Yeah, I see one question in the chat right now that says, do you have any creative hobbies that are robotics related? And do you find any inspiration from your hobbies that aid in your job related projects?
I can chip in if that's fine. Not robotics related directly, but it's trickled its way back into the work I do somehow. I am a huge fan of music, composing and writing specifically. And I was like classically trained in piano for a while before I started, working with mixing software, working with lots of different plugins and adapters in order to make music that I really enjoyed listening, especially for the games that I've worked on as part of the Game Creation Society. Turns out mixing music has a lot in common with signal processing. And signal processing ends up becoming relevant every now and again in robotics. The small world of knowledge, really. There's a lot of overlap in the things we learn and how they trickle into other parts of our life. So I would say in terms of hobbies, I would say definitely my fascination with music has somehow helped me also become better at robotics as well.
I'll jump in and speak to this too. It depends what your interpretation of creative hobbies is, but I do spend a lot of my free time mentoring a high school robotics team. So it's all very related because I end up, taking the engineering skills that I've developed and I'm teaching them to high school kids and developing their skills. And then they go on to, learn more about robotics and be passionate about it. So I kind of enjoy helping out, inspiring the next generation of kids to get involved with robotics. And really, even if they don't go into robotics, just STEM fields in general, I think, and trying to help like diversify STEM fields is something that I try to do through this connection I have.
One of my passions is home automation projects. And I think somebody else in the chat asked about good ways to get into robotics. And I would say just finding problems in your life that maybe you could solve with home automation. Like if you have a light switch and you want that light switch to turn on and off a certain time. You could make a little thing that like actually pushes the light switch, things like that, which are kind of silly, but solve little needs in our lives, are a great way to like get into building little robots, and then eventually the little robots get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with Stephen here. I think more and more as time is going on, the cost and the cost of entry into developing small scale robotic systems is getting more and more accessible. And I think it's definitely a great way to get hands-on experience. As far as online classes and other resources, I think a general thing that I found and find to be continually relevant is a very good understanding of linear algebra in space. I think those concepts come in time and time and time again when you're working with a physical system in 3D space that keeps rotating around. So I would say seeking out resources in those fields as well is a good way to get started, as well as getting your hands on like robotics platforms and trying out coding with them, see how you feel essentially.
All right, and then we have one question for Stephen. You said building the company has been one of the most important projects of your life. And can you talk a little more about that and an aspect of it that has made it meaningful to you?
Yeah, I mean, you try to build well, Deniz said earlier about the importance of people in robotics, and really the importance of people in my mind here is trying to come together to solve larger problems. And we do that by helping each other and by being honest and open with each other about what's going on. And something that was unexpected to me was going through personal problems through the course of my experience in the company. I realized that suddenly the company was there to help me after I had put a lot of effort into trying to help it. And I say the company as like the people here were trying to help me also get through tough times. And yeah, that was really meaningful to me to realize that the thing that had been built around us was creating a positive culture that could help us.
If I can kind of just build on a little bit what Stephen was saying, is I think, it really resonated when you said that it was like, it wasn't about building the product, it was building the company. It was more than that, right? And I think that the product or the solution becomes a small part of it, but it's part of that bigger system, that ecosystem, right? Especially when it's a startup, you've got your stakeholders, your end users, you have the relationships with your investors, you've got the relationships with, other technology integration partners, all that kind of stuff. And I think being in the space that we're working in with public safety, it's a very mission driven environment. And the more you get to know people, it's actually a pretty small community, but very much mission driven, very motivated. And so, working with other companies working in the same space, or working with, the fire departments that are your pilot partners, or working with your other channel partners that are going to help with your distribution and that kind of stuff. It's like you become part of this larger system, this larger ecosystem, and they become almost a support system as well, right? You lean on others when you're trying to figure things out. When you're a small startup, you're learning so many things all at the same time, and so it's kind of really motivating to see that mission driven environment. And then because times get tough, startup life especially, and so when you've got that support system, when you've got the motivation for the mission that you're working towards, you can push through the hard times and the difficult times.
And then we have a question for Jen. As a relatively early career specialist, what has been the most rewarding, challenging, or unexpected about your entrance into the working world?
I think that for going from being a student to working in the workforce, I think the biggest change you're going to notice is the free time you have and what you're going to do with that free time. But I think when it comes to to being in the workforce, I think that you need to know that you don't know everything. Like, there's no way that you can learn everything you need to know to be an engineer, to work in robotics just in college. You need that hands-on experience. And so don't be afraid to ask questions and to just really like dive in. It's better to ask all your questions in the beginning and learn than fake it. And then, 6 months in, a year in, I still don't know what's going on. Then it's going to look foolish to be asking, things that you should have asked and learned to begin with. So I would say just like, yes, you have this degree in engineering or whatever it is, but once you enter, there's all these specifics, whether it's like protocols that your particular company follows or just general rules of thumb that aren't necessarily covered in college education. So I think you're continuing to learn in your beginning years of coming out of college. You're still learning, and you just need to ask a lot of questions and take notes. And yeah.
If I can hop off that, I mean, I completely agree with you in that regard, Jen. Like when I joined Jacobi, I mean, I had familiarity with robotics and self-driving systems, but obviously my experience is not the specific experience of people at the company I'm working in and the specific problems they're tackling. And so a lot of it was, me asking question after question and, them being excited to answer and sharing their passion with me, essentially, so that we're learning together as quickly as possible so that I can actually meaningfully contribute in a way that, is gratifying to not just myself, but the company as a whole. I think there should be no shame or worry in asking questions because that is expected. That's literally learning. And every time you enter a new space and you're working on something new, all your past experiences give you the language you need in order to understand the new project that you're faced with. So absolutely, like, ask away and like be prepared and eager and excited to learn. I think that's been the main thing that's been helping me.
All right, so then we'll have one last question. This is for Swapnil. So you've worked on a huge variety of undergraduate and graduate projects, and what did you learn through those projects that you applied to your work today?
This is a bit of a tricky question just because a lot of the projects I've worked on have been so varied. I think the one main takeaway I've had from all of them is the general diligence when it comes to pursuing and like progress on a project, because it's very easy to get lost in scope creep and, like either pushing your project so much that you in terms of the vision, that you get lost in the details and actually getting progress done, or losing track of time, being like find difficulty in coordinating with other people. I think a lot of the lessons I learned from my undergraduate and graduate projects were more so the interpersonal lessons of working with other people and, how to be a very effective team working together. And I think that's something that probably everyone here has had that experience where, like, the more you work with people, the more you've developed a rhythm of how you can best contribute, how you can best communicate with others. So I think that's what a lot of those projects taught me overall, that I think services me today. I think more than the specific technical stuff that I've learned from each of those projects. I think that's what's been the main takeaway from me.
And if there's no more student questions, then we'll end off with our final lightning question, which is, if you have one piece of advice for the students, if you could tell yourself one thing or give yourself one piece of advice when you were younger, what would that piece of advice be to your younger self?
Achieving your dreams is possible, but it's going to take way longer than you think. Learn to love the journey and you'll never get bored.
I think I'd probably tell myself, don't be unafraid to explore more. There's a lot that I learned when I pushed beyond my normal comfort bubble and explored fields that I never thought I would. And those learnings have stuck with me in all walks of my life. So, if I shed more of that reticence when I was younger, who knows what other things I could learn. But thankfully, I have the lesson now, so I can still explore things while I can right now.
I would just probably echo that you don't know what you don't know. So go explore, go figure out what you don't know. And it's okay to not always have the answers. So kind of, I think, echoing what was previously said is like, don't let the fear of not knowing stop you or prohibit you. And I do like the journey, and you'll never be bored. I do like that. I'm going to keep that.
I would say to be confident in myself, and I belong there, even if I'm the only woman in the room. And that just to keep going, and that you're there, you know you should be there, and so your opinion matters to the conversation.
Thank you to all the panelists, Stephen, Swapnil, Jen, and Deniz, for answering all our questions and sharing their stories. I'll be turning it over to Elisa to give any concluding remarks.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Joanne. And thank you everyone for coming and spending your time with us this afternoon, sharing your insights and wisdom. There was so much shared here today that it would take a career to unpack. I think the one risk about these panels is that the wisdom that you have distilled into a couple of sentences and whatever is like hard earned, right? Like some of the things you all shared today have taken years to learn yourself. And so I hope these are just nuggets that all of our students take with them, kind of keep in the back of your mind, and advice that you take with you as well. So I wanted to share, highlight a couple of things that people shared today that I thought were really, really good. I think Jen, Swapna, and Deniz all touched on meeting the needs of the user, focusing on the user in your design, which as engineering and STEM fields, we often think of the work that we do as not being related to people, but it totally is. And to always keep that end user in mind, focusing on the people. I think Deniz said the end user is the expert, ask them the questions. Engineering is people-centric. Find out what people love and what they hate about what you're doing is like equally important, maybe even more important to find out what they hate, which I thought was an interesting insight. Jen mentioned that you don't need to know everything, right? Don't be afraid to ask questions. Ask lots of questions early on. That's kind of the benefit when you're starting out is you don't know, you kind of get to be the one that asks all the questions, right? It's kind of like a privilege that you have when you're starting out, that you can be like, I don't, tell me everything. Tell me what's happening here. And I don't understand this. Can you explain this to me? Yeah, I think that's just like a really, really good lesson to learn. I've had myself like struggle with that, like learning how to do that as an engineer when I was starting in as an engineer. And then when hiring people, I've struggled with helping people understand that they should ask questions, because you want people to ask questions as a manager too, right? Because you want to know what they don't know. Like you want to help them do the best job that they can. And yeah, you have that engineering degree or that STEM degree, you know a lot, you have a lot of capabilities. And that's all going to tell you how to like ask the right questions and how to problem solve. And you're still going to want to learn a lot on the job. So I love what Stephen said about how products are stories, and it ties into STEM and engineering being people focused, right? Like we are building products for people. We're building, people are building them. And, we wouldn't be doing these products if it weren't for the people that we're building them for. So, whether it's convincing others to join your story, if you're doing a startup, I love that you got to hear from the startup perspective as well as, on the ground engineering, today, because those are two different directions that you could go. You may find yourself surprised to be an entrepreneur like Deniz was, but yeah, convincing others to join your story, investors, customers, clients, that's storytelling is a huge part, as is for our students, right? So our students, as part of this program, are learning how to, or working on telling their story building their brand, their, you know, telling their story so that you know who they are and want to hire them, right? So, you know, and also say that telling stories is also a way that we learn, not just about others, but ourselves. So in telling your story and your company's story, you're learning about what you're doing actually as well. I've experienced that with RePicture over the years. And Swapnil said so many good things, but I'll highlight, you know, go beyond what's comfortable. So important. We kind of harp on that in this program, and I just always love it when people confirm what I'm telling everybody, because see, it's not just me saying that, and you do get value so much when you put yourself out there, go beyond what's comfortable. And the other insight that I thought was really interesting was being willing to physically engage with the physical reality of your machine. And in this day and age with AI and robots and everything, I just think that's a really great reminder about, you know, interacting with what you're actually producing and how it's impacting people. So thank you again so much, everybody, for joining us. And I look forward to seeing you all again at our student final presentations, which I hope you'll come and see our students. The tables will be turned. You get to hear from them. And our final in-person celebration, get to meet and mingle with everybody. And yeah, we'll be in touch and see you around. And thanks again so much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.